Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our fourth episode of season 19, a very special guest and school psychologist, Dr. Evelyn Latorre. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Evelyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I was a school psychologist for probably 16 years and then became a special education administrator. And even before that, I was a school social worker. And I really believe that the mental health services are very important in the schools. I have written 2 books. The second book is a lot about being a social worker and a psychologist in the schools, primarily in California. And my background is that in order to be a school psychologist, you take a lot of classes. But the last degree I earned was in multicultural education. I've earned my doctorate in that, and that gave me a lot of information about how you educate a variety of children and young adults.
Beautiful. Well, Doc, thank you so much for being here today. As you know, the happiness journey is all about helping people find happiness despite the challenges that they face. And I'm sure that now, after the pandemic, we have seen a tremendous uptick of mental illnesses. Either those who were dealing with mental illness, but because it was stigmatized, they were kind of like shoving it under the rug, not addressing it. And then now, post-pandemic, we see a lot more people that are comfortable in expressing or telling people that they do have mental issues, and yet finding a therapist to be able to treat those issues has become increasingly challenging. So let's go back into your career as a school psychologist. How do you find now, Doctor, the problem, the epidemic in mental illness when it comes to kids at your time when you were teaching or when you were helping the kids in school versus now?
Oh, I think it's gotten progressively worse, or maybe it's just that we're noticing it more, we're listening more, and noticing where children's problems begin. And I can remember when I first started out in 1970, I would spend weekends meeting with children. I would reward them saying that we would do something special on the weekend. And that's when I really would get to know them. In the schools, they would get sent to me, and like you, I would counsel them. But then for a while, I had a private practice where I would also see the parents and the children. And again, you study a lot about what is the origin of the anger or the acting out, or why they're not learning when they have the capacity to learn. So just having someone that, and this is true of adults too, to listen to. And it's been exacerbated by the pandemic because so many people, were left alone. And in fact, statistics say there's been a huge increase in loneliness. I assume that's among adults, but I think it works for children too. And I belong to a great many, well, several educational organizations. And I know during the pandemic, the teachers were just really challenged by having a connection with their students. And I think that's why it got worse during the pandemic, because there wasn't that personal connection. It was through the computer.
That's so true. Now, let me ask you, like, that's going to be basically a challenging question at this point. But is it true, based on the educational system in the United States or anywhere around the world, that teachers do no longer want to be able to deal with difficult children? So when they face something like that, they just put the kid either on Ritalin, ADHD or Adderall to be able to treat the problem instead of really understanding where it originates from. So is that true that it was during your time as well, where they were just prescribing those medication and before treating the kid and finding out what is the real problem?
I wouldn't say that the teachers didn't want to find out. They didn't have the background to ascertain where the problem came from, and that's why you needed social workers and psychologists to help interpret what the symptoms were, and then find out what was going on in the child's life, and kind of to see the world from the child's point of view. Childhood can be very fearful if you don't have a secure uh, uh, background, or you don't, if you don't feel secure. um, I grew up in Montana, a very small town, and I when in counseling students later in California, I remember a girl that was being ostracized by her schoolmates, and I related to her an incident where the whole school was against me. And this is I don't know how many students, maybe I don't know how many students were in the school, but it was a small school, and it was no, it wasn't. It was first grade through 12 in Ismay, Montana, where I grew up. And because I'd had that experience and she listened to me, I think she was able to go out, and the kids still were mean to her, but I think it just could change her perspective. Like, she'll live through it. That's kind of thing that you want to give kids and adults hope that this isn't going to be their life forever.
Right, that's true. So, but my question here, based on your story, why were they against you? What did you do to be able to create this kind of like,
Well, I have a big imagination. I always have had. And and so an incident happened uh at the creek. I don't know how explicit I should be.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, I wrote about it, and then I took the chapters out of my memoirs because it just didn't fit, but it had an impact on me. And what happened was, we were at a picnic, and I saw some boys grab a very developed girl by her breasts and pull her off a log. And that shocked me. I was in about the sixth grade, because I grew up in a very Catholic home, church every Sunday, and I just was shocked. And so I, with another friend, said we should tell her mother. So we went to her mother, and I blurted out, I said, and they probably pulled her pants down too.
oh,
Which,
okay.
and you could see why. So the next day, so the mother told the daughter that I had been buying what I had said, and then she told the other kids. And before that, though, I think what happened was, before that, in catechism classes, we would have classes, religious classes every summer, and the priest would ask, well, who's never committed a mortal sin? And I would raise my hand, because he was going to give a rosary, or he was going to give a gift, and I wanted the freebie.
Yes.
And and so they knew that, and I think it fell on me really doubly, because I was such a goody two shoes.
Yes.
And here, but see, I had said probably, that was my out, and I stuck to my guns. I would not say that I had lied. They were saying I was a liar, and because they interpreted it that that's what had happened. And now that I look back and I can see with kids, I could see where that could happen. But at the time, I really got physically ill. I didn't want to go to school. My mother was very empathetic, but I had to go to school. I could take a different route to school, so that, I wouldn't have the kids chasing after me all the time. And I got through it. I got through it. But no, there are traumatic things that happen to kids that they don't understand. And I think they need adults there supporting them and helping them understand, what's happening, and that, life will go on.
Did
I,
you?
I remember a young man that I counseled. I think he was about in the sixth grade, and he had made an attempted suicide. Uh, and so I was, and he would not go to any other counselor than me, because he knew me at the school. And that happens. You build relationships with the kids that you are working at school with. And so I asked him, I said, well, what did you think would happen if you weren't there anymore, if you had succeeded? And he really thought that he would be able to look down from above and see that his mother was favoring his sister and that he wasn't being treated right. So you have to get inside and see how the child is thinking.
That's so.
And yeah, but anyway, so
So, do you think that if the government invests more in having the proper support, such as more psychologists or counselors or social workers in school, do you think that in the future we will see less mental illnesses that we see now?
oh, yes, I think especially if they use programs that teach children how to look at their problems that will serve them for the rest of their lives.
Okay.
There are a lot of good programs. I can't name them right now because the names keep changing, but there are some very good programs that teach children negotiation skills that show them to how to take apart something like if someone is being really mean to them to
Mhm.
figure out. I remember my own son when he was in junior high and would come home that somebody was bullying him, and I I don't know if this is right or not, but I said, okay, find out what's going on with the kid that's bullying you because it's his problem, and it shouldn't be going on. He survived fine, but yeah, there are just a lot of ways that children and adults, adults think it's some kind of a negative thing to go for counseling. And I think the more that children see that parents will avail themselves of services, uh, then maybe children will be more open to it.
But do you think that now that we like, if we talk about the bullying part, do you feel that if, let's say, there's more policy regarding bullying in schools, that is, do you feel that this is going to certainly change the way that people interact with each other, especially young kids? Because I'm not sure if they have the brain developed enough to understand social skills that they have with each other. It's mostly like they're bothering one kid because either the kid is not uh smart enough or good looking enough or this or whatever it is. That's never going to change. So how can we enforce the zero tolerance of bullying?
Well, you can make rules and then there can be consequences if those rules are broken. And I think most schools do have rules that, no bullying policy. But what I think has a greater effect is when if you can get the kids in a group and they examine why the bullying is happening, something definitely is happening with the person who's the bully. And but it takes time. That's the other thing. It isn't a quick fix.
True.
And so yes, I think it would be good if there was more money put into mental health in general
Mhm.
in our society, but our society doesn't always value that. I mean, I think there are societies that do value, looking at behavior and nipping bullying in the bud. And I know that the schools do try to do that, but a lot of times the schools themselves turn out to be like a bully. I mean,
That's so true. You're right.
that's not a good way. It's just like in a family, uh, my father would say, do as I say, not as I do. Well, that doesn't necessarily work. I mean, kids see what their parents do and how they talk, and then they think they imitate it. And so I think schools need to uh, be more democratic and listen to their teachers. Teachers are very wise. That's the thing I learned as a psychologist is that um, the teachers get to know the children very, very well. And again, if you teach the teachers what they don't know about behavior, then sometimes they're able to help the child because they're closer to the child than the psychologist
That
is.
is, yes.
Most schools, the psychologist is there maybe one day a week, at least when I was a practicing school psychologist. I mean, I had 5 schools, so you
Yes, that's true. But here's the big problem as well, doctor, is that there's a huge generational gap between when I was in school, I'm a Generation X, versus the millennials right now, or even those, I'm not sure if what's the next generation after that. But do you feel that before, when let's say I was in school and I was getting into trouble, and the teachers were telling my parents were coming home like Hitler and basically beating the hell out of me. But yet now, if anything happens, is the parents will go and yell to the teacher, "How dare you put an F to for my son's exam?" or "How dare you this?" So the teacher is like basically stuck in between two rocks here because they couldn't discipline the kid. The parents will go and reprimand the teacher instead of reprimanding the kid. They will go and talk to the school administrator to say, this teacher is worthless. We don't need them. Take them out or fire them, whatever it is. So what is really the amount of power that a teacher can actually have with students nowadays?
Well, again, it depends on relationships that the school builds with the parents. I think the parents have to learn to trust the people in the schools, and you want to have a relationship before there's a problem. I have another example of exactly what you're saying. At one point, I was put in as a counselor in a middle school, and I was asked by the principal to have the meeting with the parents of the students who had failed a competency test. It was a group test. And for some reason, I had lost my voice. Maybe it was psychological, but I could hardly croak. I was really croaking, but I was trying to have this meeting with the parents, and I maybe knew some of them, but they again, I was just a counselor at the school. They didn't know me well. And immediately they were blaming the teachers for the children not passing this competency test.
Mhm.
And what I was had gone there with are ways that they could work with their kids so that the kids would pass the test. They didn't want to hear any of that. They just wanted to blame. And that's true in a lot of groups, that it just somehow, if you can blame. Now, sometimes the blame is founded. I mean, their point was, well, if they're not passing the test, it's because the teachers aren't teaching them what they need to know.
Mhm.
But that wasn't the case with all the students. I mean, I knew some of the students had missed a lot of school, didn't do their homework, all the things that happen. And the parents need to look at that first, or at the same time, at least, to see, what their child is doing. Again, like you, I grew up, well, I did and I didn't. Again, in Montana, I remember I came home with a grade. My parents wanted us to get good grades and would praise us for it. But I remember once I came home and I was disappointed because of something a teacher had given me a grade that I didn't deserve, and I had proof. And my parents listened to me, and I don't want to say they took my side. They didn't go running up to the school right away, but it was worth it, worth. I mean, I to this day I remember that. I was so surprised that my parents would listen to my side. I just expected them to immediately take the teacher side. So it has to be balanced. You can't just jump on your kid. You've got to know what the circumstance is, and do they have a place to study? And I mean, there are lots of things written about what helps students, you know, in
But
school.
yes, but you know what, as well, maybe you may agree or disagree, Evelyn. I'm not sure exactly how your parents were with you, but now in our society, we see parents are becoming friends with their kids instead of being parents to their kids.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that itself creates this misunderstanding about the roles and responsibilities of each. And because of that, the kid feel that, oh, well, look, mom, she's my enemy. So then the friend, which is the parent, are going to go to the side of the kid and not really reprimand the kid for for going into trouble. So that's what we see now. The big, I would say, misunderstanding of those roles is because this is happening, and parents no longer know how to be parents.
Yeah. Well, I had studied psychology, so in raising my kids, I knew that you have to hold the line, that you have to have structure and hold your kids accountable.
Yes.
And I think it's just parenting is hard. It's difficult. And especially, I think it gets harder. I mean, it looks to me from, a vantage point, my kids are grown now, but um, it looks to me like it gets harder, especially with the social media influences. And so it's harder for parents to hold the line, and but you've got to do it in the early years because
Mhm.
um, once they get to a certain age, later teen years, they listen to their peers. They don't listen so much to their parents, even though you want them to.
That's
And if you put that foundation in there, that there are consequences for their actions,
correct.
and that's how it's going to be in the real world. And then you raise successful adults.
Mhm.
But if you always give in and say, poor you, and then that's how the kid is going to grow up and think that's how the world is and expect that from the world. So yeah, I agree. It is parenting is difficult, I think, and especially to do it and hold the line. And I don't want to call it tough love, because I think it's more, you do need to listen to your kids, but you do need to have certain standards and rules too.
That's correct. But then at the same time, this gap that is happening between parents and kids because of both different generation, our method of thinking is different than the way that the kids are thinking right now, especially like you said, the influence of social media. That's never going to disappear anytime soon. It's actually going to get worse. So, and you said after a certain age, the age that you're talking about where you basically lose complete grip of your kids when it comes for them to be able to start thinking for themselves. Is there like a specific one that you are commonly aware of? I mean, the
Yeah, when I was in the schools and even when I was being a parent, I would say past middle school, once they get into high school, but it may have gone lower than that now. Again, it depends on how, I mean, it just seems like kids are maturing too quickly. I mean, I growing up in an isolated place in Montana, I mean, I could be a kid until I moved to California. I mean, I had a long childhood. I think sometimes the childhood of kids these days is much too short, especially if they're being influenced by, what's going on in the world. And to tell you the truth, I'm retired now, so I only know what's happening through the teachers and groups that I'm a part of. And I thought, wow, do they have a difficult job, as do parents.
Mhm.
And I am not counseling at this point. So yeah, I mean, I hesitate to give a lot of advice because I'm not in the thick of it as I used to be. And I know things have changed.
And unfortunately now, because of electronics and access to social media, as you mentioned, now, like for example, even my son, he's 5 years old.
Hmm.
If he doesn't get his tablet to be able to watch, of course, we only have limited access to certain channels. So we're going to have kids for YouTube or YouTube for kids, for example. So that's going to be more educational, but still, it became a drug. And because of this cycle that continues and the parents are too afraid to say no, then that
Mhm.
continues to a point where, well, no, if you don't give me the tablet, I'm going to have a tantrum. So that in itself creates repercussion to things that should have been done proactively versus reactively.